Hey guys, I am Michał from mdbootstrap.com, and in today's video we'll take a closer look at the forms of the newest Bootstrap 5. Without further ado, let's jump into the code. In this tutorial, I will use Material Design for Bootstrap, which is a free library that greatly extends the capabilities of regular Bootstrap and provides many useful features, like for example, better look, additional components, free templates, and even a free hosting for your projects. To download Material Design for Bootstrap, just go to mdbootstrap.com and click big blue Get Started button. Then click big red Download button. Next, unzip the package. And then open it with your favorite code editor. I am using Visual Studio Code. Next, double-click on index.html file and drag it to the browser. Or if you are using Visual Studio Code as me, you can install a very useful extension called Live Server. And thanks to this, you can enable live reload. So anytime you change anything in your code, the browser will refresh automatically. I already have Live Server installed, so all I need to do right now is to right-click on index.html file and click Open with Live Server. Now let's delete the existing content to prepare the index.html file to work with the new project. Select and remove everything between Start Your Projects Here comments. Save the file, and now we are ready to start our work. Let's go to the documentation of mdbootstrap.com. Note that all mdbootstrap components will perform the same as regular Bootstrap, but will have more features, better design, and overall everything will be better here. In the top left corner, click Hamburger menu, and in the Forms section you will find a link to the overview. Click it. Here you can find basic information about forms. As you can see, apart from this general documentation, there are also docs pages dedicated to the specific form elements like checkbox, file, select, and many other. We'll go through all of them, but let's start with the general stuff. Let's have a look at this basic example. Click Show Code. Let's copy this. Let's get back to our project. And I will paste it here. And as you can see, it's stretched the full width because there is no container here. So we can add a container here just for a purpose of demo. And we can also add some padding here, and let's place our form inside. Now it looks a bit better. At the beginning, it should be noted that each form should be embedded inside form tags. And inside the forms we have various types of the form inputs. Let's have a look at the first one. Input with the email type. Each input must have a defined type. Here you can see the email type and password type. There are many types of inputs, and in this tutorial we'll learn the most important ones. Type defines how the given input should behave. And apart from the input type, we also need to set an ID for each input. It's necessary mainly for two reasons. The first is to connect the input with the label. As you can see here, with the help of the for attribute, we specify with which input this label should be associated. The second reason is the possibility of referring to this ID when you write your backend or frontend logic. That means if we write some scripts, it has to know to which specific input it should apply all the logic. We also have two important classes here. The first one is a form control. It sets a styling for the input. If we remove it, it looks like this ugly native HTML inputs. The second class is a form outline. Thanks to this class, we can use a floating labels. Have a look what happens when we remove it. The label goes below the input and they work separately. But if we get this class back, they compose a one component. And we can have our floating labels thanks to this. Alright, now let's go back to the documentation. If you are in a hurry and you need some quick solution, MDB is a great place to start. As you can see, you have a few predefined, ready-to-use most popular form templates here, like login, register, contact, subscription form, checkout, or even some advanced login register with tabs. So what you need to do is just click show code, copy it, and go back to your project and paste the code. And that's it. It works out of the box. And that's not all. If you scroll up, you will find examples and customization button. Click it. Here you can find advanced, carefully designed form templates. Have a look at these beauties. So all you need to do if you want to use one of these forms is to click it, and you will be redirected to our playground. So let me make it bigger for you. Here you have our online editor, so you can play with this form directly in your browser. So let's rename this to test for a second. And you can do whatever you want with this. For example, you can just copy this code to your project and use it as you can see it, or you can first just adjust it to your needs and then you can copy it. So it's a very useful tool. I strongly recommend you to have a look at this. Alright, now let's have a look at the specific form elements. We'll start with the input fields. Click hamburger menu once again, and here click input fields. We have already discussed this basic example, so it's nothing new here. So let's move to the next section, sizing. So if you want to make your input bigger or smaller, you can use a control class. So if you want to make it bigger, use form control LG, and if you want to make it smaller, use form control SM. And if you want it to have a medium natural size, you don't need to add any other classes. Let me make it bigger for you. Alright. The next feature is a disabled input. So sometimes you want to disable input that prevents users from using this specific input, and using this in MDB is very simple. You just need to use disabled attribute. So if we copy this attribute and we paste it to this email input, where it is here, now it's disabled. I cannot use it. I can use the input below, but this one is not clickable right now. Next option is read only. If you want to prevent user from changing the input, but you want it still to be clickable, use read only attribute. And now let's move to the input types. We've already talked about them, so let's quickly discuss what other popular types we can meet at work. Text is the most popular one. So basically it allows user to type whatever he wants. The next one is an email, and if you use type email, later in you use some validation that you want to validate if the inputs, if the data that the user provide are valid, and if you use email type, it means that you require an ape symbol. So without this, it won't accept the data. Password hides the data that we type in the input, and as you know, it's necessary for the security reason. The next one is a number. So if you use type number, you cannot type letters, but you only can type numbers, and you can increase or decrease the number with these arrows. The phone number requires a number in a specific form that you can specify in your input. The URL input type requires a valid website address. And the last one is a text area for the larger text blocks. So if we use this type, we also need to use a different tags. So it's not an input tag, it's a text area, and here we specify also the number of the rows. So let me just show it to you. Let's copy this and let's remove this form. And if I increase the number of rows, now you can see it's bigger, and I can also resize the text area by dragging it here in the bottom right corner. And if I type more text, you can see the scroll bar appears on the right side. There are a few more useful features available for the input field, so let's have a look at them. So for example, if we want to add some supporting text, we can use this example. Now let's paste it to our project. And here we can specify the text that we want to use to provide some additional information to our user. And as you can see, we are using form text class here to make it works properly. We can also use something like a character counter here. So if you want to provide a feedback for your user and you require some specific number of the characters, here is an example that you can use. So if I reach the limit, as you can see, I cannot type anything more. Another useful thing is icons usage. So in mdbootstrap.com, if you type icons, you can find a huge collection of available icons, and later you can use these icons in your forms, for example. So if we copy this and paste it to our project, we have an input with exactly the same label as in our documentation. But if we change it to some other icon, for example, let's use this apple. Now let's replace this icon with the new one. We can see an apple here right now. And if you want to use a dark theme in your project, you will definitely need a dark theme inputs. And if you add a form white class, it will change all the input elements to the white color. So later you can comfortably use it on a dark background. Now let's move to the next form element, checkbox. In the hamburger menu, choose checkbox. The checkbox is a component used to allow the user to make multiple choices that are broadly used in the forms and surveys. So let's have a look at this basic example. Let's copy the code. Let's paste it to our project, and here are our checkboxes. And as you can see, we can choose multiple options. So basically, the checkbox doesn't differentiate that much from the input fields apart from this type, because here we have a checkbox type, but the rest is very much the same. So we have an ID here and we have a label that refers to this ID, and basically that's it. And what's important as well here, that instead of the form, what was the class, floating form, we have a form check here. So it's necessary for the checkbox to work properly. Apart from this, it works pretty much the same as other inputs. So we have a disabled checkbox here with a usage of disable attribute. We can change it to inline style, so They are not stacked one below another, but they are in the same line. Let's copy this and let's have a look how it works in our project. And yeah, that works as expected. And we also can use the checkbox without labels. And at the end, we can use buttons in a form of checkboxes. So if we copy this, you can see that we are using buttons as checkboxes. So we can check multiple buttons or one button, whatever we want. And very similar to the checkbox element is a radio input. So if we from the side menu, if we choose radio, you can see that the one thing that differs from the checkbox is that here we can only select a single option. So let's copy the code. And have a look. We can mark only one option. But what's important here in the radio box is that apart from the typical attributes like ID or type, which is radio, by the way, we also need to add a name attribute. And all the inputs, radio inputs, have to refer to the same name. So as you can see, it's the same. And if we add another input, radio input, but we change this name, you will notice that it doesn't work together. So we can mark both of them. But if we change it to the same group, you can see now they work as expected. So we can only check one option from all the available options. Another typical form element is a file input. So it allows us to choose a file and attach it to the input. Let's copy this. But first let's remove this radio buttons because we don't need it right now. And once again, so it works out of the box, and as you can see, if we click the input, then we can choose the file and the name will appear here in the input. And apart from this, it works exactly the same as all other inputs. So we can define sizing, we can disable it, and so on. Alright, let's have a look at other input elements. So if you want to use some advanced input fields, you can use something called input group. So as you can see here, apart from the input itself, we have some additional elements here like labels, buttons, and so on. So we can also use typical options available in the normal inputs here, like sizing. We can use an inputs with no borders. We can use input groups with checkboxes and radios, and many other very cool options. So if you want to use anything of this, simply go to the documentation, copy this, and it will work out of the box the same way as other inputs that we talked about before. Other available options, other available elements are, for example, a switch that we can toggle, very useful component, very often used an application that we want to change the status of something. Another one is range, very useful in e-commerce projects. We can use it, for example, for a price range or other options when we want to define a minimum and maximum value. So let's copy this. Let's see how it works in our project. And yes, it works as expected. And as you can see here, we can define a minimum and maximum value. So if we change it to 15, now it's 15 maximum. And if we specify minimum to 10, it cannot go below 10. Search documentation presents multiple examples with a search usage. So apart from a very typical search input with a button, with an icon, we can also see here something like autocomplete. We can see a search inside of the dropdown or a data table or select or sign off. MDB also offers advanced form elements like a Datepicker or Timepicker, and they are really awesome, but they require MDB Pro package. So if you want to use it, you need to purchase MDB Pro. And in the description of this video you will find a huge discount code that you can use on a checkout and enjoy MDB Pro with a much cheaper price if you also want to take advantage of all the awesome options available in MDB Pro package. So apart from a Datepicker, in MDB Pro we also have Autocomplete plugin. Very useful stuff. We have a date time picker when we can specify a date and a time in the same component with an inline version or a modal version and multiple options available. Multi-range, that's a useful stuff as well. So instead of a single dot, we can have two or even more, and it can be useful in many projects. We have a custom select with this nice animation, or with nice options like multi-select and many other stuff. We have a time picker. And if we have a look at the plugins, we have some really awesome advanced components like a color picker, or for example file upload plugin that we can drag and drop our file. Let's have a look at this. Isn't that awesome? Beautiful. And the last thing I want to talk about is validation. So usually use form with a validation because you want to validate the data that user provides you. And let's copy this. And here we need to provide some JavaScript. So below MDB JS file, let's add our JavaScript code. And now if we click submit form, it will inform us that we need to provide a username, city and a zip. So let's provide a username, and you can see that it changes the color to the green one, the same with a city and a postcode. And if we check a checkbox, it also becomes green. So a form validation is a quite advanced topic, and it really depends on the project that you want to build and that you need to adjust the way that you want to implement this, but have a look at this documentation and you will find all the available options that will be helpful when you want to validate your forms. You have options, examples here, like a server-side rendering or other important stuff. By the way, did you know that thanks to MD Bootstrap you can use free hosting for your projects? We call it MDBGo and it's really great. Visit mdbgo.com for more information. In the description of this video you will also find a link on how to use MDBGo hosting and how to install MDB CLI, which is a fantastic and free supporting tool that provides many useful features and functionalities. Now let me just show you how easy it is to publish our newly created project on the internet thanks to MDBGo. I already have MDB CLI installed on my computer, so all I need to do right now is to run my terminal and enter the directory where we have our project. So here is the folder with the MDB package we downloaded and where we have been working on our project. So let's copy its path and let's enter it in the terminal. Then all I need to do is to type a single command, mdb publish, and I will choose npm package manager, and then I need to choose a name for my project. I will name it form tutorial. Then I will accept all other options. And after a few seconds, my project is available in the internet at this link. Let's have a look if it works as expected. And yes, it does. Super fast and extremely useful. If you like it, don't forget to give a thumbs up to this video. That's it for this video. Let me know in the comments if you found it useful. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and see you in the next tutorial.